Hey everybody, so I'm Bob Moore from EyeSteelFilm in Montreal, and I'm really happy to be here with my good friend Violet Feng. And I'm really happy to be speaking with you, Violet, about your beautiful film Hidden Letters. This is a project that you and I have talked about for years and years, and the release and success of the film is all a great credit to you and your talent and resourcefulness. So that's this. I'm really happy to have a chance to speak with you.
Well, but also,
Um,
Bob, you've played such a role in my creative growth over the years, from Last Train Home to now. So, like I Still Film is always something that I look up to, the work that you guys done from Last Train Home to China Hathaway up the Yangtze. So it's a great honor to speak to you about this project, which I've consulted you many times on it too.
we spent some time together. I remember back when you were pitching at a hot dogs. Remember that?
Yeah.
That was fun. Um, and yeah, but it's like what a journey. So, this is something that in some ways we share, and in some ways I could never really understand is the process of trying to represent cross-culturally, Chinese stories to a global audience. And I think that's, we're in a situation now where your film has obviously resonated to a massive extent. And I guess maybe I'd like you to just speak a little bit to like specifically in the filmmaking and what you did in terms of like some context, no context, getting into character versus not. Like, how do you think this film has made it such that people from anywhere in the world could connect and understand what's going on and understand the characters from kind of a more emotional and intuitive level?
I think that, when I started the film, the world still, is not as crazy as where we are right now, particularly in between of where China and the rest of the world is, and how
Mm,
divided it has become, and how much
mm,
the stereotype from both sides is holding towards each other. And I feel very painful about this because I think over the years, my work has always been dedicated to trying to break that stereotype and trying to find a connection that people can build some understanding of each other instead of like having separation and bias, because we all hold biases, right? Like, so as
hmm
filmmakers, is the most fundamental thing is to challenge our biases and in a way of still provide subversive kind of perspective in to connect to the audience. So
mm,
I think for this film particularly, when I started framing this film, I knew that the story happens in China, but I wanted to tell a story about women's experiences globally. So in order to
mm,
do that, I mean, the no-brainer way is actually to focus on the humanitarian aspect of it, and then to also dig deep into the internal emotional space of women, because that's the place that connected to all women around the world, where we're all
mm,
suppressed, by the revived patriarchal around the world. Look at where US is right now, look at what Iran is, Afghanistan, China, like if we don't keep pushing, things can just roll back. And the suppression of
mm,
us in the internal space is so personal, but the more personal it is, the more political it is. So I knew
mm,
that I wanted to go into that space because that's a space that I struggle myself the most as a woman as well.
mm,
But
mm,
at the same time, how to use, this, like I try to make a film about women's rights, but if it's about China, I cannot really, really to make a film on the nose about that topic. So how do I leverage, this beautiful secret language Nushu as a lens, as a vehicle to help me, provide that kind of unique context and landscape of where women are living under, the revived patriarchal we're living under. And that's both
yeah.
unique and also universal, I guess.
Yeah, for sure it is. And you did the thing that you did the work that had to be done, which was you found some really interesting, some really nuanced and multifaceted, real feeling characters, people. We feel like we've introduced ourselves to some to individuals with competing motivations and circumstances beyond their control, and you stuck with it such that things happened. And there are some really resonant themes in terms of like the commercialization and trying to like take over and yeah, is is there a Chinese expression that's the equivalent to mansplaining? Is there a thing in Mandarin? Would you say is there a word that corresponds to that?
Well, it's more of authority speaking, but in
Hardly
embedded in
speaking,
that is men
is
speaking.
it, and it has a masculine connotation, I'm assuming. Yeah, I mean that's in a sense that's like one of the predominant themes of the film is like the mansplaining of women's culture to women themselves, right? And it certainly yeah, it hits. I
How
guess
does that resonate with you as a white, really tall white male?
yeah, I mean it's a weird that you introduce this situation to be like, well, we've worked on films in China together. It's like I'm like the ultimate like non-connected person in this regard. But I think that is you know a credit to you with the film is that I felt like that I identified more with the female characters than the male characters because the male characters are by necessity kind of more one-dimensional, right? They cannot exist for us. You can't have everybody existing in so much nuance. It becomes too confusing for the viewer to process emotionally or to engage properly with the primary people. So uh, if I had it, you know, if I was going to engage with the film, I have to engage with the main characters, and I did. Um, you know, and that so in that respect, it should feel universal. You said to me I don't know if you remember this, but in a self-effacing way afterwards, you were like, maybe it's just a film for women. I was like, no, it's,
Yeah,
we're just joking around or whatever.
I do
But
want to reach it
yeah,
to men with this film too.
it just it you know, and I think that the success you're seeing is indicative of that. I want to ask you a little bit about like, you know, how sort of coming back on this cross-cultural question a little bit, and this is something that the two of us as producers have looked at on a lot of films, is like how do you make a film able to connect in its home country as much as in the sort of global documentary scene, which is a really specific thing. You know, a lot of films like connect in China or connect, let's say, in Sweden and don't connect in the rest of the world that are Swedish films or whatever. But like it's certainly a challenge. So do you perceive there to be a difference in the way that you think folks in China will see the film versus folks in North America or in Europe?
Um,
Like, could they see it differently?
I I guess no, because I think that I'm really approaching this from a personal perspective, but also
Mm,
a perspective that can be shared by all women. So in that
mm,
regard, I feel like we're all painful in this struggle. We're all painful in this battle. And from that point, I don't think it's going to be different. However, I think that to make a film that's connected to China and also elsewhere because it's China. So there is a unique aspect to it, because we're dealing with a society, a culture that there's a lot of confinement in the way that we can explore stories. And me that over the past 20 years, I do dedicate myself to tell Chinese stories and hoping that it can outreach to people outside of China. But also, I think it's also really important for me to show the films in China so that the people that I represent will hold responsible and hold me accountable, of the story I'm telling. And
mm,
also, I truly believe as a Chinese that changes has to happen from within. So if we
hmm
show the film in China, then there's a chance that things can be improved, even, like even to move a needle, I think that
mm,
ultimately I do hold myself responsible for that. But at the same time, in order to be shown in China, there are actually a lot of hurdles we have to cross because, like our subjects are under tremendous kind of stake compared to people outside of China. They could easily lose their job and freedom, and filmmakers can easily lose our status and freedom. But at the same time, I think that you know, like I said, everything can be political, you know, like in this kind of
Mm-hmm.
art. So how do we, you know, tell a story that's subtle and nuanced, but also can still share our subversion as a filmmaker of our point of view. And over the years, I think that that kind of like push of myself, that how to solve this challenge kind of helped me to find my own voice in this. So like
Mm-hmm.
that's the way that I have to approach it in this way of the film. On top of that, it's I think it's also in line with what Nushu is about. Also, you know, it's also nuanced,
Mm-hmm.
poetic, and all that. But that approach has become my language, my cinematic language, and I think I start to also embrace it. Actually, that I do embrace that um, more nuance is more powerful. So I'm hoping that with that actually, because there is not this super straightforward way, that it leaves
Mm-hmm.
the space to connect to people, to interpret in the different ways, and to come together and, you know, appreciate the film in a nuanced way.
I like that. That's a good sum up, and I think it's a nice note for us to leave this brief discussion on. Sometimes I think of it as like, or a lot of people will talk about the, you know, the deeply personal is the most universal, and so I
Absolutely.
like your twist on that. That the more nuanced, the more powerful. I like
Yeah, I completely
that.
agree with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this, Violet, and I wish you the most continued success for the film, and I can't wait to see you in person one of these days.
Well, thank you for the continued support to in me and my work. Thank you so much, Bob.
Bye bye.
Ciao.
We'll talk soon.